The phrase black sheep refers to something or someone that doesn't fit within a specific group because they possess some sort of personal trait or quality that tends to make them be viewed in a different and or negative way by others. In the world of entertainment, there's a lot of things that can be labeled as the black sheep of their respective franchises. When it comes to cinema, the first film that comes to mind is Mission Impossible 2, the action-packed sequel to the first MI film that, while entertaining, is highly criticized for its cheesy, over-the-top action and excessive use of slow-mo that makes the film downright unwatchable in some people's eyes. And when it comes to video games, there's the very divisive Devil May Cry 2, which left a bad taste in many fans' mouths when it first launched back in 2003, which was fortunately remedied due to the release of the critically acclaimed Devil May Cry 3 a couple years later. But there's another game in the series that I hold near and dear to my heart that I'd also consider a black sheep that doesn't seem to get as much love and respect that it rightfully deserves compared to that of its peers. And that game is none other than Ratchet Deadlocked, the fourth installment in the Ratchet & Clank series of games. If you've been regularly watching my content for the past year, then you know that I absolutely adore the Ratchet & Clank games, especially the earlier ones from the PS2 era. I've reviewed the first 3 games already, so if you're interested in hearing my complete thoughts on each of them, then I'll be sure to link each video in the description and pinned comment down below. Something that I failed to mention in those videos is that with each and every passing entry in the series, the overall focus of the gameplay began to change in a lot of ways. The first game was a simple 3D platformer that had a heavy focus on traveling all throughout the galaxy and exploring all sorts of interesting and very unique planets that were highly detailed and actually felt lived in due to the semi-linear level design and colorful characters you often come across.
And blast it!
Look, plumber's crack.
What did you just say?
I said, look, the plumber's back.
The second game was more of a shooter and began to introduce some light RPG elements, but still retained the platforming and puzzle solving from the previous game. By the third game, the series' focus had clearly shifted from simple platforming and space exploration to a full-on third-person shooter. But after the third game in the series, where could Insomniac take Ratchet & Clank next? Could they go back to the series' more streamlined roots, or simply continue to go down the more third-person shooter heavy gameplay that the series had been slowly heading towards with each passing game? Well, from the footage you're seeing right now, I'm pretty sure you can tell that Insomniac went with the latter instead of the former. Ratchet Deadlocked takes place shortly after the events of the third game. Ratchet has assumed the role of captain of the Starship Phoenix since Sasha, who was a former captain of the ship, has recently become the new mayor of Metropolis on planet Kerwan. While Ratchet and Sasha are having a FaceTime chat, the Starship Phoenix is taken over by a bunch of threatening goons who were sent to capture Ratchet and Clank along with Al by a greedy and egomaniacal media mogul by the name of Gleeman Vox, who goes on to force Ratchet and only Ratchet himself to participate in Dread Zone, a popular and highly dangerous sport where you fight to the death in gladiator-like arenas where the goal is to simply survive. Although I said Ratchet and only Ratchet himself participates in Dread Zone, Clank and even Al to a lesser extent assist Ratchet here, with Clank acting as his guide through each and every challenge he goes through. The overall tone of Deadlocked is much darker than that of the previous games, and like those games, this one takes place in the Shadow Sector, a dark corner of the galaxy where law and order doesn't exist and everything is pretty much illegal, which explains why something like Dread Zone is able to exist in the first place. The planets you visit this time around perfectly conveys the darker tone that this game is going for. Most of them are practically devoid of any signs of life, as they're just used as nothing more than battlefields to be fought on, which leads me to believe that the people living in these areas were forced to flee elsewhere due to the sheer pandemonium that they were subjected to on a daily basis. Planet Orxon returns from the first game, and this place was in pretty rough shape back then, and it's somehow in worse shape than it was when we last left it. A painful reminder of what greed is truly capable of. And speaking of greed, it's a recurring theme in these games, only this time is represented in the most twisted way possible in the form of Gleeman Vox. Vox is an extremely greedy man who is willing to go to great lengths in order to ensure that Dread Zone pulls in stellar ratings, even going as far as rigging the entire Dread Zone battle dome, that's full of innocent people by the way, to explode. He doesn't care who he hurts or who he kills as long as he makes a lot of money. There's a hilarious moment later in the game where people are mourning the loss of a famous Dread Zone contestant, and he uses the free publicity to show off some merchandise that people may be interested in buying.
Bowing to public pressure, Gleeman Vox acted quickly to address the issue.
Fans of Dread Zone, I share your pain for the loss of the mighty Ace Hardlight. I encourage you all to express your grief and sympathy by purchasing this limited edition Ace Hardlight Memorial action figure on sale now for only 299 bolts.
He doesn't feel any type of way whenever someone dies in Dread Zone, because in his eyes, every single contestant is a cash cow that exists to make him lots of money, and he will continue to milk them for all they're worth, and if he thinks that they're worthless, or even worse, boring, then he'll give them the boot.
Note the deadlock collar securely fastened around your neck. This collar cannot be broken or removed. Should you stray into any restricted area, the collar will administer an extremely painful shock. Observe.
I hate this job.
Should a contestant become uncooperative or worse, boring, his or her collar can be detonated at any time with the push of a button. Well, there you have it. Nothing to lose your head over, right?
Seriously, Vox is the most underrated antagonist in the entire series in my opinion. Not because he's a complex character or anything like that, but rather that he embodies the theme of greed so damn well. He reminds me of Drake from the first game because they have a lot in common, such as the both of them being shady businessmen whose greed drives them to commit very heinous acts. It's nice to see an interesting primary antagonist again in the series after the second and third games. Both Quark and Dr. Nefarious were pretty weak villains in my opinion, and I know that saying that about Dr. Nefarious is gonna piss a lot of people off since he's a fan favorite, but after playing through Deadlocked twice for this video alone, I've realized that he just doesn't cut it for me as an antagonist as much as he used to. I think that an egomaniacal and greedy businessman who wants to maximize his profits as much as possible makes for a better villain than one who wants to turn everyone in the galaxy into robots because he was bullied growing up. Ratchet undergoes a simple yet kind of decent character arc here that I think is just as good as the one he underwent in the first game. When he first starts out in Dread Zone, he's practically despised by everyone since he's a newcomer, and is constantly being dragged by the media. But as Ratchet continues to overcome more and more tough challenges, his popularity climbs higher and higher amongst fans of Dread Zone, and he starts to enjoy the fame and success that comes along with being a gladiator, until...
I just need to close one more circuit.
Ow, you're a genius! You did it!
I know.
No!
Looks like somebody broke the rules.
Al dies? Well, he doesn't die, he actually comes back as like a half cyborg later on, but it's this along with Ratchet finding out that the other heroes have been kidnapped and killed one by one, which makes him ditch the idea of ever settling into this hectic lifestyle. A far cry from Dread Zone's undisputed champion, Ace Hardlight, who serves as a foil to Ratchet himself. Ace was once a noble hero just like Ratchet, but got lured into the dark world of Dread Zone. Instead of refusing to engage in senseless fighting and other undoubtedly terrible activities, he continued to do so until he eventually became a shell of his former self. Ratchet, on the other hand, overcame this temptation of giving into fame and greed and ultimately does what's right by putting an end to Dread Zone once and for all. I know I've been yapping on and on about the story for several minutes now, but I can't help it. It's so well written and dark, but isn't necessarily gritty at the same time, since it still somehow retains that unique sense of satirical humor that's been present in every game up until this point. As I've said earlier, the overall gameplay of Deadlocked has changed quite a bit compared to its predecessors, with it being a full-blown third-person shooter and a damn good one at that. Most of the basic mechanics from the previous games have returned, such as health steadily increasing with the more experience you gain, and weapons evolving the more you use them on enemies. And speaking of weapons, there are only around 10 to use here, most of which are just reskinned versions of older weapons, but the revamped weapons leveling system more than make up for their inclusion here. Weapons can be leveled up to a max level of 10, and after completing the game, you can buy mega versions of all of them, which can be upgraded even further up until a max level of 99. Yes, that's right, each weapon can be fully upgraded to level 99. Now this may seem a bit excessive, but these weapons evolve stupidly fast, so if you focus on using one at a time, then you can easily have all of them fully upgraded in no time throughout the course of multiple playthroughs. Weapon mods aren't anything new since they were introduced in the second game, but they're implemented on a whole nother level here in the form of Alpha and Omega mods. Alpha mods basically increase your weapon's functionality, like the rate at which they fire, their ammo count, and impact, etc, etc. Omega mods, on the other hand, are the true highlight of the gunplay here, as there's a lot of cool mods you can unlock, such as Shock, Acid, and Brainwash. But my personal favorites are the Freeze and Napalm mods, because there's nothing more cooler than watching enemies burn to death in puddles of lava and shatter in a million pieces after I finish them off with the Scorpion Flail. The level design is extremely linear compared to that of its predecessors. You can still travel to different planets, but you can only do so in a specific order that's laid out for you. and if you have enough dread points, which you can acquire by completing various challenges. The challenges themselves are quite fun and aren't really that repetitive, at least to me, because they're quite varied and only last for a couple minutes at a time. Besides the Landstalker missions, those suck, they drag on for way too long. A lot of these challenges can be extremely tough at times, which is why you're given a pair of combat bots by the name of Merc and Green, who serve as your allies in battle, kind of like the Galactic Rangers from the previous game, with the only difference being that you can order these guys around by using the D-pad. These guys aren't half bad and help you out a lot by doing various tasks such as hacking orbs, turning bolt cranks, or shooting out cables for you to grind on. They even have this really cool ability called Ravage, where they throw down this deadly bomb that destroys everything around it, but I didn't find myself having to use it all that often because the weapons I had in my arsenal were more than enough to take out enemies, or at the very least keep them at bay. If your bots are having trouble taking out foes, or more importantly staying alive, then you can always upgrade their armor and give them new weapons / abilities, such as the ever so helpful shield links. You can also give them these very sick paint jobs and change the look of their faces to make them look much cooler than they already are. As great as these guys are, they can be just as much of a pain in the ass at times. No matter how many times I upgrade their armor, they always get easily taken down in the midst of battles, which leads to me having to revive them every 5 seconds, especially when I'm facing off against tougher opponents. This happens quite often and it's really annoying to have to deal with, but that's one of like 2 issues I have with this game overall, with the other being the long and boring Landstalker missions that could have used a bit more work or have been cut from the game entirely. But other than those small gripes, Ratchet Deadlocked is a really solid and underrated game. It's crazy how whenever there's discourse around which is the best Ratchet & Clank game, this one tends to get left out of discussion most of the time. I personally wouldn't go as far as saying that Deadlocked is the best game in the series, but it's definitely in the top 5 and that means a lot since there are like 14 other games it has to contend with. It's nice to see it being praised by others for the absolute solid title that it is and has always been in more recent years. The weapons along with their various mods and upgrades are some of the very best we've ever got. They definitely have that illegal black market kind of look and vibe to them, which is a nice touch considering where this game takes place. The planets here are mostly forgettable besides a few such as Kronos and the Ghost Station. The Ghost Station is my personal favorite because of the enemies you face off against. Robot ghosts? That's as dumb as robot zombies and I absolutely love it. And the music here is really great to listen to. I've heard people complain about not being able to hear it due to all the sounds of things going boom, but that's what the settings are for, just turn the music up. The music here perfectly complements the darker tone of the game, with much heavier songs that seamlessly combine rock with bits of electronica here and there, such as this. And last but not least, Deadlocked has high replay value, just like its predecessors. The overall experience is only about 6 hours long, which is really short for any game, but the endless weapon upgrades and tougher difficulty levels encourages you to play over and over again until you've pretty much earned everything the game has to offer. There's even a co-op and multiplayer mode where you can play as Jack from the Jak and Daxter series. It's interesting to see him here as an unlockable character, even though I wish they used his character model from Jak 2 or 3 at the very least instead to fit in with a darker tone. But its inclusion here, as well as Ratchet's and Jak X Combat Racing, which released around the same time, just goes to show how much of a friendly rivalry there was between Insomniac and Naughty Dog back in the early 2000s. Ratchet Deadlocked could really benefit from some sort of official re-release on modern platforms, and even more so because of its resurgence and popularity over these past few years. I don't doubt that it'd do well sales wise, and who knows, It might convince Insomniac to make another Ratchet & Clank game in the same vein as Deadlocked, but at the end of the day, any version of the game that isn't the HD version for the PS3 is an absolute win. And with that being said, if you've enjoyed the video, then I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe so you can get notified whenever I release new retrospectives such as this one. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope to catch you guys in the next video. Peace.
More calls coming in.
Ratchet, Clank, it's me, Captain Quark. There's a nasty rumor going around about heroes being kidnapped, but don't worry, it's baloney. I mean, come on, nobody came to capture me, right? Just imagine making a show about galactic heroes without Captain Quark. Ha! Well, anyway, you guys missed the last 3 meetings of the Quark Cadets fan club. But don't worry, I've got extra copies of the newsletter, and I even saved some of the snacks. Hope you like custard.